Good morning, church. God is good. All the time. Amen. Amen. Yes. What is the question?
The chicken crossed the river to find the egg it dropped somewhere down at the river at the lost and found. So, nobody actually submitted that, sorry. This is actually an announcement. There's a lot of really cool stuff that y'all have lost. This is the lost and found in the church office. We hope you will pick it up this morning because I'm pretty sure it's pretty valuable to you all. So remember, if you've lost, check your bags, check your pockets. If you've lost anything, head to the lost and found in the church office.
All right, and I'm going to give a shameless plug here. If you love my school, the Conference Committee on Reconciliation sells these schools to support our work in California. And if you would like to order one, Janet Cattenhorn makes these. 100% of the proceeds goes to the California, the Conference Committee on Reconciliation for Cal Nevada. Let me introduce our next speaker, who is Nadine Smith. She's the Executive Director of Quality Florida.
John, you had one job. Good morning, everybody. I feel obliged. The very first night I was here, I had dinner with a group of people. It was somewhere near the end of the meal that somebody asked me which church I was a part of. I had to come out as not being a part of any church. And I'm not saying that people treated me differently, but I did feel a little bit like an anthropologist, will they accept me, within the flock? So I just thought I should, put that out there to begin with. And part of my journey to be here with you is that Matt and I were at a conference, I think it was a gathering of executive directors, and one of the things he said was, I don't understand why the secular movement isn't more actively seeking partnership with those of us in the faith community doing this work. So, the gauntlet was thrown down. All right, let me find a different metaphor. The invitation was offered, and I accepted, and we began sort of a journey to figure out the ways that Equality Florida, which focuses on LGBT justice and equality in Florida, and how Reconciling Ministries might work together. And it was aided by the fact that, Matt has a long history in Jacksonville, a place where we do a lot of work. But we were also in the midst of the marriage fund. And when I went to the gathering in Orlando, I won't use any name, but during one of the breaks, someone came up who was involved in a church in Florida and said, why do gay people keep coming back to the church? And quite sincerely, like searching my face for an answer, and I thought, not the right person. She was like, why on earth would you return basically to the scene of the crime, the place where so much pain and so much injury has been done? And that question has kind of haunted me because when I was very young, I don't know why I'm doing that, it's more like that. When I was very young, me and my second oldest brother, we were really into the church. We would, any day, any time the doors were open. And my awakening as a lesbian, the first time I discovered that there was a word for this, was when somebody hurled it at me as a slur. I went to the library to look up what the word meant. And I began to understand that this was something I needed to keep very, very secret. Very, very, I began to hear the things that used to give me inspiration in a different way. And so it is, as I've said before in Reconciling Ministries gatherings, kind of dislocating to be here, but also very encouraging, because the truth is, in Florida, and as in most of the South, the most dedicated opposition to the things that we are working on emanate from people who hold the same book and use some of the same jargon, but don't approach their faith in the same way the folks who are gathered here. And I want to do everything I can to make sure the voices in this room are raised louder, and the faces in this room are much more visible as we struggle for full equality across the board. So I thank you all for letting me be here. I do want to say this. I think it's the 1-year anniversary of the uprisings in Ferguson, and I was reading a lot about what has happened there. And because marriage equality has been secured via the Supreme Court, we get asked this question at Equality Florida. I'm sure our sibling organizations in other states. Well, you guys must feel pretty good to basically be done. And it just scrambles me to hear that, because I think to myself, we aren't anywhere close to done, and the hardest work is ahead. And, I'm married. I am gleefully, gratefully, happily married. And we have a 4-year-old son, and it's great to know that wherever we travel, our marriage is legally recognized. And it is far from the most important thing in our world. Years ago, it's 2008, a city manager in the city of Largo transitioned from male to female. And the information was leaked to the media, and it became a real big national story. And the city manager, who months earlier had been told that had been given high ratings, suddenly an emergency meeting was called, and the city manager was on the verge of being fired. And so we organized, and I went to that event. I went to the city council meeting, and I was the only Black person I remember in the entire building. And the reason that I tell you this is the place was filled to capacity, and after I spoke, I left the main room in order to allow one more person in who would have the opportunity to speak. So there were a bunch of us gathered in the lobby, and I had this, and it was brutal. I mean, the things that people were saying about this city manager were just brutal. And I remember thinking, I want to be where she can see me as she leaves the building. Because I had this little piece of paper that said, "Don't discriminate." It's a pink piece of paper. I wanted to make sure I was in her line of sight. And the door opened, and it wasn't her, it was somebody else who was with us. And he said, "Can I have one of those? Do you have an extra one? I'd like to stand with you." So I looked in my little bag, and I pulled one out and handed it to him. And at that moment, this police officer, commonly named Butch Ward, came just barreling at me. And he looked like a cartoon bull. And he said, "No, you don't hand things out here." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "That's it." And he grabbed me, twisted my arm behind my back. And I said, "Am I being arrested?" And he said, "You are now." And he began to, I had a video camera in my hand, and he kept trying to throw it. It was, attached to my hand. He kept trying to throw it on the ground and break it. So I called out, my wife was there, colleagues were there. I just called out, "I'm being arrested." And they took me down this hallway, pushed open these swinging double doors, using my body as the battering ram, and slammed me up against the glass. My feet weren't on the ground, and they tried to break my arm. And then they took me to the ground, and I saw this flash of light, which turned out to probably be the thing that really saved me from more violence, was that I saw a flash and I heard a scream, and I wondered for a moment whether it had come from me. But I couldn't breathe. There were 4 cops kneeling on me, And one of them kept saying, "What's your name? What's your name?" And I heard Coach Ward say, "We know her name. I know exactly who she is." And I couldn't breathe. And I was trying to say, "Help." The flash and the scream. And it turned out that the flash was a St. Petersburg Times photographer snapping a picture at that moment with me pinned to the ground and some police officers on top of me. And the screen was my wife, who had followed behind them and saw what they were doing. And I say this to you because in this work, it gets scary and it can feel very lonely. And securing marriage equality, as important as it has been for my family, do not feel safe in my own country, in my own state, in my own city. I'm very aware of the work that we have to do, and I'm very aware of the discomfort that we will have to feel in order to get that work done. So my invitation to you, or my gauntlet to you, whichever one inspires you more, is to understand that we collectively will have to step outside of our comfort zone. We will have to allow the voices that arise, that don't arrive in nice packages, neatly stated in the way that we might have done them, to understand that people are fighting for their lives. And I have never been more frightened of where we are and more hopeful of what is possible than I am in this moment. And it's precisely because of gatherings like this and an awakening that uprisings in Ferguson and other places have finally brought to this country. At the very core, civil rights movements expose the contradictions between who we say we are and what we allow to be done, and those contradictions are on full display right now. So the question to all of this is that okay with you? And if it's not, what will you do? Thank you.
Friends, may that moment be a call to action for us. So I think I'm going to add to some of Nadine's anthropological research here. How many of you at your annual conferences have praise sightings, where you come up to the microphone and you talk about the things that you see God doing in your church? Have those? We have those? Today we're going to share a little bit with our regional organizers with Reconciling Ministries and some of our leaders within the Methodist Federation for Social Action about things that are happening jurisdictionally. We know that this space is not optimum for seeing where everyone is from, but we wanted to be able to make sure that folks could share some about the good things that are happening, as well as maybe some of the struggles that are happening in various jurisdictions as we prepare not only for the General Conference, but highly aware that General Conference isn't the end of our conferencing, that we have jurisdictional conferences that come just 2 months later. So wanted to bring that awareness. I'm going to invite Izzy Alvaron and Steve Clunny to come up and talk about things happening in the Western jurisdiction.
So we'd like to ask people from the Western jurisdiction to please stand or raise your hand as you are able.
Just so you realize, the smallest jurisdiction has almost 170 of the 700 people who were gathered here. And I'm a Northeast jurisdiction clergy person living in the Southeast jurisdiction and speaking to you about the Western jurisdiction. But the reason for that is because I am fast becoming a super fan of the Western jurisdiction. I just want to mention a few incredible sightings of movement that are happening in the Western jurisdiction. One of the biggest things that's happened is they were given the authority by a bishop in the Western jurisdiction to take on the authority and become the movement. And so the Western Methodist Justice Movement was birthed at the jurisdictional conference of 2012. And they have been doing a lot of work on your behalf in the Western jurisdiction. So that's one of the areas where we're very excited about the spirit moving in the Western jurisdiction. They passed another resolutions around divestment from the occupation of Palestine. Those were passed in Oregon, Idaho, with a tremendous amount of pressure coming at them from the general church not to deal with these. And they stood in the face of that and said, but we're going to do the right thing, which is what we do with our biblical obedience movement. You do the right thing anyway. The third sighting that I just want to share is we're adding another intern, which is cool, because that means they get somebody else to work with out of the MFSA office in Washington. But we're adding another intern who's going to work on organizing with a new MFSA chapter in the Pacific Northwest Conference to assist with reproductive health care and choice and justice advocacy. So those are some great sightings from the Western jurisdiction, and just seeing you all here is a blessing.
Happy birthday!
That should be a part of the praise and celebration. This year we had the California Nevada Conference pass a policy, the Board of Ordained Ministry, a policy of open ordination that sexual orientation and gender identity is not an issue if you want to be in ministry in California, Nevada. We added California Pacific to the list of conferences that have declared themselves reconciled, in addition to CalPAC, in addition to Desert Southwest and California, Nevada. This year alone, from January to today, we had 14 new reconciling churches. We have 35 new prospective reconciling churches and 562 new reconciling United Methodists. But I would like to say, and I will end with this, with great power and privilege comes great responsibility. And I would call out the Western jurisdiction. Everyone is fabulous. Every jurisdiction is fabulous. And because we have a lot of privilege, we have to celebrate our responsibilities. Being mindful that in some contexts, prophetic witness is best expressed in hospitality and gracious engagement. That there is no shortcut as we move from this place. There is no shortcut to building genuine, grace-filled relationships. We might have the best legislative strategies, we might have the best creative protests, but if it is not rooted in the hard work of building relationships, we will fail. Because delegates to General Conference come from the pews of our churches, and until we talk with them, walk with them, share our stories with them, we will not succeed. We also need to celebrate our intersectionality. For in our collective body, we have gender identities, sexual orientations, our Asianness, our brownness, our blackness, which I kind of am missing in this crowd, immigrant identity, refugee status, economic class status. We need to love all of these parts of the body of Christ. And I always say, you cannot love me because I'm gay, you need to love other parts of me as well. And that is a challenge. In our celebrations come these great responsibilities we need to celebrate. So in the West, we have a lot of things going for us, but that means we have a lot of work to do for and with our siblings of faith in other jurisdictions. God bless you.
I'd like to invite Lori Young and Ann Munn. Ann is here. These are our regional organizers from RMN for the South Central jurisdiction. And Ann Munn is a leader in our Rio, Texas chapter.
Good morning. We have 2 minutes. It's going to go fast, so let's do it. Can I get that minute back? I want to talk to laity for just a minute. And I promise, clergy, we will continue all the wonderful conversations that we started this weekend. But if you are in the South Central jurisdiction and you are laity, I want you to stand up. You can fuss at me later. I want you to stay standing. Stay standing. Come on. Here's the deal, y'all. Laity have power. I need you to use your power. Use your power for good. Our LGBTQ neighbors need you. Use your power. Your congregations need you. Use your power. Your pastors, whether they're progressive or conservative, need you. Use your power. Your DSs and bishops, whether they know it or not, need you. Use your power. You can't lose your credentials. Your bishop cannot change your zip code. Use your power. Our youth need you. Yes. Our movement needs you. Use your power. We have a lot of things coming up in the South Central jurisdiction this fall and next spring, all the way for General Conference. I need you. There is so much happening in the South Central jurisdiction. We are making a lot of progress. The momentum is much greater than it has been before. I need you to help me keep that momentum going. Say it with me. Laity have power. Laity have power. Use your power. Use your power. And I will yield the remainder of my time to my friend from Memphis.
Good morning. I'm here to talk very briefly about the Rio, Texas chapter of MFSA. You are sitting in the Rio, Texas conference right now of the United Methodist Church. I will say, I've been asked to say words about the contribution that the Rio, Texas chapter of MFSA has made to this gathering at Gather at the River. Our Vice President, Roland Curry, is not only on the board of National MFSA, but also on the planning team for this event. Joy Butler, we claim Joy Butler also, both of whom were involved in trips to San Antonio to plan this event. Many conference calls for the last year and countless hours in helping. We also have a friend of Rio, Texas MFSA who was a workshop leader, the art therapist, Ruth Earhart. We're proud of her. We were instrumental in helping to create the ordination service for Reverend Dr. Mindy Johnson Hicks, Methodist clergy, who transferred her clergy credentials this weekend on Friday at this event to church within a church. We had a service about that, or we helped with that service. Also, I would ask to talk about our work in the death penalty. This is a very fertile state, as you know, for work in the death penalty. We've done legislative advocacy. We have co-sponsored an event featuring Sister Helen Prejean of Dead Man Walking fame. We sponsored another event with support from the General Order Church and Society to feature exonerees from Texas Death Row. There were several who came together and spoke to a couple hundred people in Austin. A year ago, ran a conference with the help again of a grant from GBCS, brought in an exoneree by the name of Anthony Graves, and he spoke at our annual Peace and Justice Luncheon. It was very, very powerful. And we've been given an award by the Texas Coalition to abolish the death penalty for our work in that area. The third thing, our chapter is headquartered in Austin. Unfortunately, the geographical issues are there, but we hosted the Program Council and Board of Directors of MFSA last fall in a meeting which involved providing housing, food, and transportation for 25 or 30 people for 4 days. That takes a huge amount of work. We house people in people's homes, and I cannot even imagine what it would be like to plan an event like this. We were delighted, but had a lot of work to do to host that. I want to say just one more thing. A year ago right now, the place where you were sitting was in the Southwest Texas Conference. As of last January 1, 2015, the Southwest Texas Conference and the Rio Grande Conference, which is a Hispanic conference, merged to form the Rio Texas Conference. And one of our challenges is to build relationships with our Hispanic United Methodists in this area. Language can be a problem. We have a big challenge ahead of us to get to know them and work with them.
From the Southeast jurisdiction. Helen. So Helen and I are going to share some work out of the Southeast jurisdiction. The Southeast jurisdiction, as we know, is a interesting place. We know that some of the structures of our church that are put in place make it difficult to organize in the Southeast jurisdiction. But we also know that it's fertile ground because there are justice seekers everywhere. And there are justice seekers seeking oases in deserts. And one of the oases within the Methodist Federation for Social Action is with our North Carolina chapter. That's the eastern part of North Carolina. The MFSA chapter there, under the leadership of now deceased Jack Crum, started to do a lot of work on civil rights. And when Jack passed away, his family endowed a conference for the MFSA chapter there. So twice yearly now, the chapter in North Carolina presents the Jack Crum Conference on Prophetic Ministry. Last spring, the focus was on biblical obedience, and I was there to present a workshop, and we were very blessed by the presence of Frank Schaefer and Bishop Mel Talbot, and it was an amazing time. There were probably about 150 people in attendance for this one-day conference in Durham, North Carolina. In the spring, the Jack Crum Conference will be focusing on Black Lives Matter and the work of anti-racism and white privilege to engage, educate, and activate MFSA folks and their friends in North Carolina. And so we're very thankful for the North Carolina chapter for modeling a way to increase education and opportunities for people to come together and have meaningful, deep conversation.
So I began the role of Southeast Organizer about a year ago, August 1st last year. One of the first conversations I had was with a layperson from the Florida Conference who had recently attended a reconciling workshop at last year's Florida Annual Conference. And she said to me, she said, it was really great. I turned up into the room for this workshop and my pastor walked in. And I'm like, oh, that's fantastic, that's great. She said, yeah, well, I'm the church secretary, and I didn't know she was going to be coming to the conference, to the workshop. And I thought to myself for a second, these two women work together every day, and neither of them knew that the other one was harboring inclusive thoughts. And you know what? I was so grateful for that conversation so early in my role, because it tells me, and this is an in-faith public citing. It is my firm conviction that in every single church in the Southeast jurisdiction, without exception, there are people harboring inclusive thoughts. And here's the tragedy. They are terrified. They are terrified that if anyone else finds out that they're having these thoughts, they will be vilified, ostracized, thrown out, and rejected. And yet, if they had the bravery and the courage to nervously raise their hand, or maybe tentatively wear a little rainbow pin, I'm also convinced that 2 or 3 pews back, there's somebody else having those inclusive thoughts too. What would it look like in the Southeast jurisdiction for all of those people sitting there in fear that our institution has instilled in them, that they are not allowed to say out loud who they think should be afforded equal rights and equal love and equal privileges? Our institution has done that to them. What would it look like if they all suddenly started saying, yes, me too, I'm having inclusive thoughts? Could you put your hand up if you know, so first let's do stand up if you're from the Southeast jurisdiction. There were 50 people, I think. I really wanted to meet everyone. If we happen to set eyes on each other, if you've not spoken, please come find me, because I really want to say hello to everybody. But now what I want you to do is, would you put your hand up if you either have family or friends who live in the Southeast jurisdiction? Just give me a wave. That's a lot of people. Would you do something for me? Would you call them up, or send them an email, or send them a Facebook message, and give them some encouragement about saying out loud that they believe that LGBTQ people should be having equal rights in our church and in our society? It will change the church in the Southeast if we can do this. Thanks very much.
So now I'm going to invite Ann Brown and David Meredith and Christina Wright and Vicki Flippin. Get 4 at once.
I'm going to begin with my second language. Y'all. One of the things we're so aware of in these days together is the significance of geographic context. There is this notion that the northern jurisdictions are somehow ahead of the south. The truth is, they aren't. And they aren't monolithic in the sense that they are moving on this work. Even though many of our annual conference teams are very strong and have offered tremendous leadership to this movement, there are still many places where it's painful and scary for LGBTQ people and their allies. In some conferences in the North Central jurisdiction, reconciling folks don't feel safe wearing rainbow stoles at annual conferences or walking the streets of their cities. In some conferences in the Northeast jurisdiction, the work feels treacherous.
I think you should know that David and I are actually Lois McCollum par this morning. These are her words,
Not ours.
and we are doing our best to stand in for Lois. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, that would be Lois, but I'm grateful to Ann Brown Burkell, that would be me, and David Meredith to my left, for taking my RMN spot along with Vicki Flippin and Christina Wright from MFSA, who are presenting around our jurisdictional glory spots. And we are here to talk about both the Northeastern jurisdiction and the North Central. David.
To be sure, there are signs of glory of the Spirit moving. Those show up in the elimination of harmful language and annual conference dialogue, incremental but significant increases in voting blocks to support non-discrimination, annual conferences that have passed legislation go on to general conference to eliminate the incompatibility clause, and the successful election of many progressive delegates and majority progressive delegations.
I'm happy to add my conference, the Baltimore Washington Conference, is one of those.
That's the Ohio too, shocking.
Lord, who's a mysterious man. Camp Beloved held its first week-long camp for LGBTQAI teens with the historic SCOTUS decision. Biblical obedience and altar for all commitments are growing in our jurisdictions. We are in conversation with our equality partners to prepare upcoming trainings for inclusive communities. I, that would be Lois, have been fortunate in the last 7 months to get to know many of you and to meet some of you for the first time here by the river. I'm looking forward to continuing to get to know you and your regions better. And we're so grateful for the leadership we see across the annual conferences.
We've heard many people say, as we have gathered these days, that you are family. And if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in the UMC. So on behalf of Lois, I say, I join that choir on days when I feel ready to leave the denomination that has nurtured me and taught me about God, that someone in a Sunday school class calls to ask how they can lead their small progressive group to affiliate as a reconciling community. On days when I feel discouraged at yet another institutional heartache, someone in a small congregation calls to say that their vote has just occurred and they're excited to be officially affiliating with the network.
As your regional organizer, I look forward to visiting the NEJ in the coming months. In NCJ, we are hopeful Bishop Carcaño's visit for winter warming in Northern Illinois on MLK weekend will be a jurisdictional event. Mark your calendars, those of you in the NCJ, for January 16th, 2016.
So I say to all of you, Lois writes, thank you, gracias, gracias. Your time, your energy, your commitment, your recruitment of others to join this movement that proclaims the truth of God's love is what gives me hope. Revealing the places where injustice and oppression are occurring is a refrain that keeps me dedicated to this God work. Your chorus of praise when God's wholeness, healing, and light are flowing give energy to take us to the next round. Movements move. As Pat Humphrey's song says, keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back.
I have a particular message from the New England Conference about how this moving forward is happening in their conference. That conference has courageously invited anyone across our connection who is LGBTQ to explore ordination in their conference if they feel unwelcome to pursue clergy credentials in their own conference. They are also, through an organization called Be Encouraged, offering regular retreats for those who are contemplating to pursue ordination to get encouragement, tools, and additional help with that process. So that's a huge kudo to the Northeastern jurisdiction. Before I turn this microphone over to my good friends and colleagues from MFSA, I want to take just a moment of personal privilege. Those of us on the Foundry United Methodist Church team here have had an interesting experience going on in the background of this conference. On Friday morning, a young woman who is a child of our church, who grew up in our congregation alongside my own two children, who has been homeless on the streets of San Antonio for over 2 years, came here, found her way to the conference because her parents told her that people who loved her were here. And she believed she was ready to go home. So we have been spending a lot of time and energy working to get Ella home. And I believe God brought Ella to us not only for her own healing, but to show us in no uncertain terms that there is so much work that our denomination needs to do. Ella, in one human being, represents many of the issues that our church is trying to address. Homelessness, addiction, domestic violence, healthcare, mental health services that are so inadequate, hunger, poverty, reproductive rights and reproductive justice, education, job training. Ella is pretty much everything in one package, with the exception maybe of racism and global warming. And if you all tell me that it is hotter this August in San Antonio than usual for those sleeping on its streets, then she's all about global warming too. And it is sinful. It is sinful that the United Methodist Church, which is all about all marginalized people, all social justice issues, is wasting energy, time, and resources fighting and being sinful towards our LGBT brothers and sisters. This is wrong. It is so wrong. We need to solve this problem in our denomination so that all of us, LGBT and straight, laity, clergy, deaconess, bishops, can move forward with this other work. The homophobia, the racism that Nadine talked about. We have a lot of work to do, and we are not a denomination that is intrinsically a group that sits around quietly reading our Bible and arguing about it. We have important work to do. So when you pray next this morning, please add Ella to your prayers. She has a long, tough road ahead. We hope we finally got her on a bus this morning. Yay! Well, she needs our prayers. And thank you for giving me that moment.
As someone who has just returned home to the North Central jurisdiction from 6 years living in the Southeastern jurisdiction, I just want to echo all the thoughts that you have heard. There's work to be done no matter where we live. And thank you, Dan. A lot of the issues raised throughout the other jurisdictions are issues also occurring in the North Central jurisdiction. So for the sake of time, I just want to do a quick note. There are events that happen after General Conference. We focus a lot on General Conference, but something happens 2 months later, jurisdictional elections. And we will be electing bishops in the North Central jurisdiction. So one of the things MFSA has been working on is what qualities do we want in our bishops? It's starting to discern who may be possessing those qualities, and we are happy to start sharing that where appropriate. So don't forget that physical elections are coming up as well.
I'm maybe flippant, and I'm in New York City, and I would love to hear the voices of my Northeastern jurisdictional brothers and sisters. There's a lot of great stuff going on in the Northeast, but I'm just going to highlight one beautiful thing. In Eastern Pennsylvania, in case you don't remember, is the conference that put Frank Schaeffer on trial and took away his orders. So not everywhere in the Northeast, as has been said, is progressive. This is a hard conference to be in for progressives. And so we want to highlight some beauty that they did there at their annual conference this May. They were able to pass the MFSA chapter there, and along with their friends, were able to pass 3 really great pieces of progressive legislation. One was opposing solitary confinement, one was for full funding for public schools, and one was taking the living wage movement and bringing it home to the churches and calling for a living wage for church employees. So we really want to celebrate those progressive.
Friends, this is just an experience of dipping our toes in the water. Just dipping our toes in the water of the great work that is happening, the challenging, the difficult work that is happening. Not in our offices in Washington, D.C. or in Chicago, but happening on the ground in your churches, in your annual conferences. And it's done because you collaborate with one another. You work together to make sure that God's justice, that God's kingdom reflects the values of John Wesley, of the United Methodist Church, as we know those values to be, and the values of Jesus. Thank you for indulging us this morning, and share celebrations with one another as we depart today.